Carlos Nelson with Cascade Media Group, and tonight we're talking some politics with the third district at large, City Councilman Mr. Brandon Ellington. How you doing, Brandon?
Man, I cannot complain. I'm doing good.
Hey, Brandon, run it down a little bit of what's going on in your district, how you see things. We got the upcoming election. Uh, what's going on with 18th and Vine? I'm just running a whole lot of different things down. Uh, there was some type of incident with this gentleman, Deron Black. Just give an overall view of what's going on in your life and what's happening in third district at large, and I'm sure you know what's going on north of the river. Give our audience a little peek at what's happening in the city from the horse's mouth.
Yeah, well, I'm third district at large Councilman Brandon Ellington, and I'm gonna start it off saying this. Uh, a whole lot of grifting is going on the local level, not just related to the east side. Whole lot of grifting, whole lot of gamesmanship, whole lot of recycling of tax dollars, and a whole lot of promises of development that never actually takes place. You mentioned Deron Black. The media and my opponents are trying to disassociate themselves with Mr. Black, but Mr. Black has been the hit dog for a minute, and it ain't new. It's not unknown. There's several pictures and other things that not only draw direct evidence to the association, but I don't think what happened the other day at my property was an anomaly.
Talk to
Freedom
our
Inc.
audience about that. They might not know.
Yeah, for those that are watching, if y'all want to get a real good breakdown, go to www.electellington.com. I'll be putting out more media information, videos, pictures, footage, the whole nine, linking stuff together. But yesterday I had the gentleman come to my house, and then later on Facebook, social media, he was threatening my life with a weapon. But again, they're trying to utilize Mr. Black's mental health issues as the reason he did it. But I know you always gas up the little homie that has something to lose that you can disassociate with. And that's what we see right here. It's not like they hadn't been engaged with him. It's not like the tactics haven't been talked about. We'll get to that later. But on the east side, it's a whole bunch of gifting and recycling over fictitious promises. Since I've been on the council, we've been able to stop a lot of dollars that were meant for the ground that used to always get diverted, i.e. PIAC dollars, to actually be reinvested in the community. We've been able to see street repairs in the third district since I've been on the council. We've created an Office of Citizen Engagement that is universal for everybody in the city of Kansas City, and it allows people to access DOJ dollars, Department of Justice dollars. So when we talk about crime programs, health programs, educational programs, or any other program that you could think of that has a service aspect to it, people can now directly partner with the Office of Citizen Engagement, bypassing every other department at the city, and help us expand the attainable services to citizens in the community.
Tell me this. When you look at your tenure thus far, you mentioned a couple of times misspent dollars and cents. Where do you see that happening?
We going
Give
through
us
all
some specifics.
we going through all contracts and consulting process, but just to give people an overt idea, I got something that I'm talking about 4 versus 40. So I've been on the council for 4 years. We've had over 40 years of elected representation. So you mentioned 18th and Vine. Let's start there. 18th and Vine this year, this cycle is set to have next coming year, excuse me, is set to have over $75 million invested in there. Three or four different projects at a 2025 thousand marker. 18th and Vine has been sold to a developer for $1. The majority of the buildings on 18th and Vine is not owned by the business owners down there, nor is it local people that actually own those buildings. down there. So when you look at 18th and Vine, 18th and Vine is the perfect example of dollars that have been allocated to the entertainment district that has not been adequately invested. And what do I mean by not been adequately invested? There are no brick and mortar storefronts for people to have access to, correct? Uh, there have
I
been
would
no.
have loved to have had Cascade Media Group down in the 18th Street area, but it seemed like that was just like really unattainable to do anything.
Well, it depends on who you are. I'm going to use Mr. Gates as an example. When I first got elected to the council, Mr. Gates was talking about doing a plaza on 18th and Vine. Mr. Gates had already started generating his own dollars. I believe they created I want to say reserve. That's not the fund, but I'm going to say a reserve fund that was a trust. Excuse me. They set up a trust with Park and Rec where the money was put in there. This year we hear about investments on the plaza. But now diving deep in, there's a contractor that's associated with the city and with the private developer. His name would be Leonard Graham, Teleferion Brown. He's a city consultant. So that means people have to get approved before they get development down there. Myself and Councilman Robinson, last year, the year before, it was in the papers that Councilman Robinson thought there was a conflict of interest down there. Became a big media interest. And then after that, sequentially, I was the only one to vote no on Mr. Graham. And the conflict of interest would have been him being a city consultant. He's also on a private development project down there. So if you're on a private development project in which you have benefit factors, and you're also the contracted out developer or contracted out consultant that is supposed to approve development, and we have no development getting approved down there, it doesn't take a genius to figure out it's probably a real conflict of interest. But why did I mention all of this? It goes to the suppression of the area. So when we talk about 18th and Vine, we're not only talking about storefronts, a historical destination, we're also talking about living spaces and historical apartment complexes. So Parade Park, right down the street from 18th and Vine, it's often disassociated from 18th and Vine, but it's the first Black enclave down in anywhere. Anywhere. It's one of the most unique development structures that we have seen anywhere. But why is this important? The same contractors, lawyers, and consultants was tied up in 18th and Vine. When I got on the city council, there was a gentleman named Herb Hardwick that sat on the CCED board. Herb Hardwick had to resign because I was blessed to be able to uncover that over 50-some% of the project was carried by his law firm. But why is this important? It's important because Herb Hardwick was also the attorney for Parade Park when Parade Park went into the non-disclosure agreements. So there's a very realistic possibility that you have a cohesion of developers and attorneys that understand land suppression and also the arc of development and the arcs of elections. So when we look through the east side of Kansas City and we look at Prospect and we look at Van Brunt and we look at Eastwood Trafficway and we look at Truman Road and we look at the lack there of viable improvements in the last 40 years. Oh, also the schools. Let me not forget the empty school buildings. When we look at all of these in honest, honest examination, we see that we've been given bad fruit. And we've been given bad fruit by developers, contractors, and consultants that typically engage in the political arena. And they typically
Can we
elected
pull a
officials.
stop button right there?
Well, whenever y'all want.
All right. So
But it's all good.
what we're pushing here at Cascade Media Group is block voting and group economics. And let me say this: when I first came to Kansas City in '78, and I had my construction company and was a founding member of the Full Employment Council Board, and the first thing that I really noticed with our classes, our social and economic classes and educational, that there's a certain section of our community that gets in position, these different positions, port authority or whatever, and they learn these sophisticated games that the majority community plays, and then they come and they play them on our community, and that's
Well,
why we.
I would say that's not accurate though, because when
All
you
right.
talk about not dig it, follow me on this. When you talk, because that's the excuse they use. That's what they do. So we doing the same thing. But when you talk about the majority of the community, they're not doing it in a small silo in their own backyard.
Well,
So
I'm
it's
not
not.
saying that. All I'm
No, no,
saying
no, no,
is,
no, no, no. Hold on, follow me on this, Carlos. And this is part of this campaign cycle that people are going to feel. Even when we talk about bypassing standards. So you are hearing in the Black community that it's the white corporations that's getting all the work. But who is the consultant? Who is the contractor on there? Because there is certain WBE, MBE standards. I'm going to give you another one. $75 million from 12th Street to 75th Street off of Prospect. I vote no on that. Telefair and Brown is one of the majority receivers of that. I didn't vote no on it because of him. I vote no on it because there's no associated development with it. Now, we couldn't have got that $75 million without so-called WMB people on there, right? So again, when we talk about the excuses of this is what the majority community does, and I've learned this, and now I'm implementing this area, that is non-applicable. When we talk about the overt, intentional suppression of information in the community, I'm gonna go back to the Office of Citizen Engagement. There has been no appointed African-American leadership, whether that's newspapers, preachers, etc., that has told their congregation or their constituents about it. Well, why haven't they? Because my name is associated with it. And also tax benefits is associated with it. So when we have all of these talk think programs that come through the inner city that's supposed to teach you about crime, voting, and all this other good stuff, but they have no actualization in those programs, then that's nothing but a sustaining mechanism for that entity because they know where the grant dollars are. They're not teaching the community how to get the grant dollars. Why? Wouldn't the grant dollars allow individuals that want to do outreach like you're doing with the media? Wouldn't that allow them to bring in youth, train youth, get equipment? What about the ones that want to do rehabbing of homes? Wouldn't that teach hard and soft skills that is extremely accessible through DOJ dollars? What about some of the other service, lack thereof services that we talk about in the inner city? Now, when we talk about government, government doesn't create or generate money within itself. It gets dollars from taxpayers. So when we talk about all of these health agencies, most of these, if not all of them, are subsidized by government, which means that the community that is receiving the services can actually qualify and create their own institutions to eradicate the services. But that's not what we have here. And that's what I'm all about. I'm all about community self-determination and community empowerment. So when you look at the East Side and you look at the 40 years of lack there of progressive movement, can't blame nobody. The school board has been ran by folks that look like me. So we can't say white folks is closing down schools in the inner city. We can't say it. Same when we talk about the council. Fifth and third district has been predominantly ran by black folks since the 60s, predominantly, not exclusively, predominantly though. And if it's been predominantly ran by black folks since the 60s, there is no excuse for lack their dedicated funding, unless we start looking at the people that's been placed on the boards and we start looking at the people that's been placed in these positions. Because we're not talking about uncountable amount of people at all.
Hold again. I think that you must have misread me because everything that I was talking about, playing games on your own community, is what you're really describing. What I'm saying to you, and that's where what I was saying, block voting and group economics, those are two simple things. Those will give you a seat at the table. Why
Only
hasn't
with
that been accomplished by our political leadership and like from education, as you point out, the school district? You got a black school district, but you don't even control what's going on because go ahead.
very simple, Carlos. Very simple, Carlos. People get engaged with what they understand. So when you have a community that suppresses information, There is no block voting because block voting comes from conscious consensus. What you have is suppression of votes, which allows the appearance of block voting. If we have
Right.
block voting, yeah.
You're
So it's
supposed
not
to
the
have
same.
100,000 people voting, and you got 15,000, and you saying that's our block. They represent all Black people. Oh no, most of the bottom 3/4 of the community that we try to represent, they're not even plugged into the information.
Yeah.
And that is intentional. And that's where Cascade Media, being the only Black-owned digital media of this kind, I'm like, shame on politicians, shame on community leaders, shame on the education system, and shame across the board with corporate America when they are not supporting the things that are actually supporting our community.
But
From my perspective,
you can't actually
go ahead.
follow me on this, Carlos, because this campaign, man, I'm pulling all covers off. And I've always been honest and transparent, but it becomes a point when people have to realize that when you deal with somebody that don't bend or break and you push, you're gonna get pushed back. So when we talk about corporate society or unions, I'm gonna use unions as a segue for corporate society. Their interests aren't the same interests as marginalized communities, whether that's Black, white, Latino, etc. Their interest is simply for the unions. And you see this in various public displays. I give you an example. When there was a racial issue with the unions, you would hear the union say, "Well, that's that union, not us. We fight for workforce standards, not workforce diversification." That's an internal understanding. So if we understand that the union fights for workforce standards, not workforce diversification, we shouldn't expect unions to fight to diversify. We should actually expect us to create entities to ensure that they're diversifying if our interest is diversification, not just workforce standards. You mentioned public education. Public education either shows a fundamental understanding of accessing education or not. And I'm going to use an example. My kids go to public education. How many of these so-called fictitious leaders have you ever seen at your schools? And I'm talking to people that's watching this. And probably none. How many of their children go to school with your children? Probably none. So that shows an issue. And I'm talking about white and Black, but that shows the issue. So if you don't see their kids in the same institutional apparatus that your kids are in, you should probably wonder why. And we talk about parochial schools and we talk about private schools, and this is where rich people send their kids, right? Because they're able to control the curriculum, where poor folks have to have the same understanding. If public education is something that is publicly given and it only takes 6 pupils to actually be able to start a school in the state of Missouri, then there's no reason that poor folks aren't starting our own schools to ensure that we have the type of curriculum that we want. But again, this comes from political understanding and political leadership. So when you have people that have built their lives off of people not understanding, and this is the only way they're able to stay in the door, that's the issue. Me, I try to get everybody to have the same level of understanding, if not more, than I do, because I know that would not only make me more valuable. If somebody next to me has more education than me, that gives me something to aspire to. Somebody next to me has the same level of education that I do, that gives me somebody to depend on. But that's not how we've been conditioned in our community. We've been conditioned to be followers. We've been conditioned not to seek information. And we've been conditioned to watch folks look good and tell us white folks is keeping Black folks colonized. When I know that's not the truth.
Well, I know that's not the truth.
Now I'm not talking about racism and
no, I'm talking in general.
blockages, but yeah.
Block voting, group economics on a world stage puts us wherever, whether it's local or worldwide. When we come together and they duke it out on any policy, if we are together, we decide what that policy is. You just see work itself out with the Republican Party. You cannot be speaker unless we get what we want. And that's how it used to run here in Kansas City back in the late 70s and
It,
early 80s.
it still does. It just doesn't work that way for the people. So I'm
Well,
glad you
hold it.
mentioned it.
That's all I'm saying. The people was getting it. There was plenty of work for black contractors. There was plenty of work for anybody that wanted to work.
But you know why, Carlos? Because there's a difference between nostalgia and real life. So when we talk about Leon Jordan and we talk about Bruce Watkins and we talk about some of the early founders of freedom, this is who we stop talking about. We only talk about the leadership. You don't talk about nobody for freedom in the 80s. You don't talk about nobody for freedom in the 90s. You don't talk about nobody for freedom in the 2000s. So we allow people that actually care for the community to live, die, to work, live, and die. And then we allow people to utilize their lineage and their image to sustain livability without concern and care for the people. And how do you see that? You see that because all of the accomplishments that people talk about stop when they die. And then we do nothing but talk about nostalgia. This is what it used to be. This is what they used to do. But we're not being honest. They used to
Let's
do it
switch
because he
gears
was
and get
alive.
over to Northland. Talk to our audience what you see happening on the Northland.
Northland is interesting. So Northland has been doing a lot of expanding and a lot of infrastructure improvements, but I want to skip past all of that. So typically we talk about people talk about the Northland as a separate entity. They talk about the Northland as non-diversified. I have an issue with that because I know there's a lot of Black folks that have moved up north. I know there's a lot of Asiatic folks that have moved up north. I know there's a lot of Polynesians, Hawaiians, etc. that have moved up north. But why did I mention this? Because we have a whole segment of North Kansas City that we're not even engaging with. And this makes us fundamentally weak. So I talk about the east side, but Kansas City is ultimately controlled by fiefdoms. And it'd be the same up north. It'd be the same with the fiefdom, and the rest of the constituents are kind of left outside of the door. If you talk to a lot of people up north, they don't know what port they in. I'm in Kansas City North, I'm in North Kansas City. A lot of them don't know. That's by design. The same way the east side has been dysfunctional by design. If you look at the council, we pass more contracts and consultant work than we do solidifying tax dollars in a long-term trajectory, right? So you can either employ people, which creates long-term stability, or you could do specialized contracted out projects to get the work done, which is not cost effective.
What do you feel about
Remember,
the airport? I want to go rapid now because we're gonna be
I
closing
feel,
up.
I feel like I'm not going to jail, so I've been pretty good on all my votes at the airport. I read.
And looking at that pretty tight.
Oh yeah, well they should. But not only the airport, we should actually pay attention to again contracts. And for those that want to get more details, go to my website www.electellington.com. We're putting out videos from the floor. We'll be putting out contracts. We'll be showing you where the dollars was supposed to go and why they didn't go there. And again, this is not a white and black thing or brown thing. This is an actual green thing because we're talking about tax dollars and
Business.
benefit.
Business. All right, so let's hold it. Let's keep it rolling. How do you feel the city manager has done over his tenure here? Give me a rating on a 1 to 10. You can give some commentary.
I'm going to give a negative rating, but I'm not all going to put it on the city manager. So I have issues with the city manager and what he's supposed to have done, what he's supposed to have not done. My biggest issue goes back to the Office of Citizen Engagement. It took me over a year to actually get a full-time employee solidified there. We passed the funding amount and everything else within like 2 or 3 months, but it took a year to actually actualize and get somebody in there. A lot of that was on the city manager. But the reason I say I don't put everything on the city manager is the average elected official on the local level on the council, they write resolutions. City manager may have 100, 200 some resolutions. That actually means nothing. So you have people, again, that position themselves off of the masses' ignorance, like they're doing something, create a resolution that actually has no realistic effect, and we put it on the city manager, as opposed to the community understanding what they want and electing people that know how to draft that. That's the difference. I think I've only found maybe
Mechanics.
one or two resolutions since I've been on the council. Everything else has been ordinances.
All right, let's keep it moving. How do you feel about these bike lanes?
I'm not a bike lane fan. Uh, but again, we're talking about contracts and consultants. So the bike lane has been wrapped up in the Complete Streets KC. So they're pretty much
Third
guaranteed.
district, man. I'm butting in a little bit. I'm like, what people you see running
Not,
bikes like that you're gonna invest that type of money?
not it's stupid, but I'm gonna give you a different example and come back to it. You remember the purple lights that we had a while back? Purple lights is gone, right?
Right.
All right. So that means somebody got paid to put purple lights in, and then they got paid to take purple lights out. So sometimes when you create a fix for a problem that doesn't exist, I'm encouraging people to look beyond the first dimension. We didn't have an issue um, with bikers not having access to streets, but we created a fix that is non-germane to the lifestyles of most people in Kansas City. And I'm pretty sure there will be a fix to that coming soon. Uh,
Let me button again. Coming soon. The fix is already here. It is called gentrification.
no, that's not a fix.
No, hold it. When I say a fix, so those bike lanes will be used.
Well, when not being funny, in most states, bike lanes have been associated with gentrification and the complete change. But gentrification, another word for that would be opportunities. And the reason I put it that way is on the east side, we have nothing but opportunities. Land, what used to be housing stock, building stock, all of that is there, but it's been severely suppressed. 18 Divine uses example. There was about three or four businesses that have reached out to me that was trying to buy property on 18 Divine. I've received nothing from this. I'm not a benefit factor of none of the businesses or anything like that. Don't even know the people. So I went to the leasing people at the city and try to hook them up. And then several months go by, they call me back. They still ain't had nothing done. Cut a long story short, we started seeing the call and other entities populate these buildings that people have been trying to buy and rent. Why? Is it because they generate money? Or are we talking about underlying political connections that suppress information, which suppresses the community, which creates stagnation, and it gives us our environment that we have? There is no excuse. And again, anybody watching this, man, I encourage you to get engaged with me, www.electellington.com. It's time to pull off the sheets. It's time to stop faking with these folks. And it's time to be honest with ourselves while we don't have nothing. The majority of dollars is generated for poor folks, whether that's housing, infrastructure, criminal justice related, etc. But we have nothing.
Right. Hold it. I 219 Carl Bussey, Ajamu Webster, and Kim Adair on our business channel when we talked about all of this. And that, as I said, it's a vicious cycle. What winds up happening, you have these downtown councils, you have all this money circulating, supposed to be for Black people or
It's a
poor
skill,
people.
Carlos.
And then you have really white people administrating the money, and it's not.
Carlos. It's
Yeah.
an excuse. It's an
Yeah.
excuse. It's an excuse.
Well, I
Follow me.
understand that,
No,
but I'm
follow
saying
me. Follow me. No, follow me. They say the metro cut stops in the Black community. Black community was losing buses. Well, who and what organization has a lobbying contract for the metro? So if the President for Freedom Inc., which is the largest Black political entity, has the contract for the metro, do you really think the metro is cutting routes with the lobbyist that runs the biggest Black political entity against it? Cut it out. Look at the taxes on the east side. East side has the most taxes. We had the highest property tax increase. And who is our property assessor? Her husband's Freedom Inc.'s treasurer. Cut it out. So again, we can create excuses and say the white man is the boogeyman, but the person and the people in the policy seats that is allowing the oppression to hit us looks like us. Who closed the schools down? It's the white people from North Kansas City. Nah, it wasn't the white people from North Kansas City, was it? Because we dominate the school board. But Dale said it when he was running. He said, "Hey, I mean, when the school election was happening, he was saying that certain people get elected. I'm gone. I'm gone because they're gonna get rid of me." They were saying it. And then we say, "Oh, they're closing down the schools." But who sits on the board? When the 22 schools were closed on the east side, who were sitting on the board? Was the board predominated by people from North Kansas City and South Kansas City? I think not. When the
Well,
grocery stores got recycled, who benefited from that? When 31st and Prospect got resold to us, who benefited from that? Is there black businesses down there?
yeah.
When
Well,
when
let me.
18th and Vine, when 18th and Vine development package got granted, and the Simmons Group and all them people said, "Hey, we're gonna do black businesses down there." I asked a question on the floor. I said, "Who's gonna pay for it?" They said, "Well, the city will have to create a program." Has the city created a program? No. So they sold the community the ideal that they was gonna build a multiplex area and we was gonna have brick and mortar spots available. And then they turned around and said the city will have to create a program. But didn't the city just give you the land for $1?
Well, let me say
Ain't
this.
this the black community? So again, man, those that want to get involved, man, reach out to me because we not faking with nothing. We pass policy, we pass ordinances, and we educate the community. And we do that because we understand an educated community is an independent, self-determined community. And an independent, self-determined community has access to healthy living, has access to institutions that they control, has access to proper education, has development, has employment.
But all that comes again, as I said, and we're getting ready to close out block voting and group economics. And I put this on you. I put this on every black politician that I know here. We've had this company since '08. We have served this community in many different uh, fashions on many different subjects, and we have not received the support to engage our bottom three-fourths of our community and get them where they can know this information. Everything that you have said, for the most part, are the main reasons why we don't have block voting and group economics. Because the people that are in position to take our community to that next level, they're taking themselves to another level in our community, using our community as the tool we
So they
represent.
don't even live over. They don't even live in the community.
Yeah,
That's even more
I'm
sickening.
with that. Everybody wants to move out to Blue Springs, out to Lee Summit, and all of that. And then the majority community circles around and they buy up where you lived, and you can never even come back because the value of the property is so high, you can't even come. You shortly, you won't even be able to walk in the neighborhoods, less more come. So with that being said, I want to get off of that. Do you have any closing words?
Yeah, I'm just gonna go off of what you said. We have a lot of vulnerable areas in our city. If you like more information to get engaged or to stop it, so I'm talking about Ivanhoe, Parade Park. There's several properties that has been sitting on for prospecting, which is actually owned by people in office. And if you would like to get engaged in any capacity of helping break the shackles off of people's minds, arms, and legs, and helping to create a sustainable city, reach out to me, man. www.ellington.com. I'm not a typical politician. I'm more of a proletarian. And it is what it is, man. It's all for the people.
All right, that's what I'm talking about. And as we always close, when you invest in your community, you're really just investing in yourself.
Program is brought to you by the Kansas City Business Association.